Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. In this lesson, let's take a look at some tips and tricks for masking and selecting within our landscapes and our wildlife photographs. From Super Select AI, where we can quickly grab individual sections or subjects, to the line mask tool where we can create our own custom mask shape, to creating gradients behind a custom subject. This lesson is all about quick, easy masking techniques that you can use on a variety of different photographs to bring them to life. So let's jump into it. Let's take a look at my first tip for masking and selecting inside of ON1 Photo RAW. So inside of Photo RAW here, my first tip for selecting and masking when you're editing landscape or even wildlife photography is to use Super Select AI or any of the AI masking tools inside of Photo RAW to quickly identify and select those particular subjects or regions within your image. So let's just quickly use Super Select AI and some of the other AI tools within this particular photograph to grab some of the different regions really quickly. So first things first here, let's just go in the Develop tab here, and all I'm going to do is just go into my color section, grab my color dropper tool there, drop it in this section of clouds, just to cool things down a bit. So really all I'm going to do inside of Develop here, just so that we can sort of focus on the selecting and masking part. So with this particular photograph, there's three things that I want to do. I want to apply detail to the rocks and the mountainous regions. I want to give a little bit more contrast and maybe dim down the exposure bit in my sky. And I want to bring in some saturation and some color pop into the foliage. So to do that really quickly, the first thing I would probably go do or grab as a tool rather is the Super Select AI tool. You can grab it by hitting K on your keyboard. And you can just hover over different regions of your photo, and it will identify those different regions. And if you select them, it will turn that region or particular area in your photograph blue, identifying that region and telling you that you have it selected. So let's just select the mountainous regions and these rocks here. And to add in some detail to them, we're just going to right-click. This little menu will pull up, and we're going to use dynamic contrast here, and let's just use surreal there to really give it a little bit more texture and make it pop with detail. Now with this particular masking method, because it's identifying really strict regions, it may give you some harsh edges, especially if you're using quite a bit of a filter or you're modifying tonal adjustments. So to soften up the edges there, I'd recommend going up to the top modifier bar and just use this feathering slider here. You can see that by feathering it, it just softens up the edges of that mask and blends it in a little bit more with the other areas. So let me just show you really quick in the mask view here. So this is the mask that we created with those selections. And if we hit K on the keyboard and we modify the feathering there, it blurs the edge of that mask so that we have a little bit more of a natural adjustment there. And of course, with any of these adjustments, you can always modify that opacity to tone it down a little bit and ensure that it's as strong or as tame as you need it to be. So we've used Super Select AI to identify this rocky region there and apply that detail to it. Let's now use another AI masking tool to grab this sky section. So let's go into our local adjustments here, and we're just going to go into this add adjustment here, and we're just going to hold down on this arrow key there. And let's go down to sky. And because we have paint in selected here, if we choose apply, it's going to add in a new local adjustment layer. And because its default setting is to darken, we're already darkening that sky section there. And we're bringing back a little bit more detail and contrast to our sky. Let's just add in a little bit more contrast there. And I may pull up on the whites just a hair for a little bit more life. Now, just like we did earlier to make things a little bit more natural and blended, let's use our masking options to feather the mask. In this case, let's just use our actual masking options within the adjustment, And let's just pull up on this feathering slider there. And you can see we can blend that adjustment much more naturally into our foreground scene. So now let's go into the Effects tab here. Let's add another adjustment, or a filter rather, and let's add one for the foliage here. So let's add filter, and let's go to Flora. And to boost the Flora color and saturation, let's go into Color Enhancer. Let's just boost the saturation a bit, a little bit of vibrance there. And then let's just modify that opacity to make sure it's not too intense. So if we turn that off and on there, we're boosting up the colors within that flora. And let me just make it all the way intense. I know it can be quite intense, but because I'm demoing it, I do want you to be able to see the difference. And so I do know it's quite intense, but you can always lower that opacity there. But you can see, in this case, it's really making that flora pop and ensuring that all that foliage is nice and saturated. So let's just hit the backslash key on our keyboard. Remember, we haven't done anything besides modifying that color temperature, so let's just see the original here. And really quickly, just a nice, quick and easy edit there with these two filters and that local adjustment. And you can see they do a whole lot to modify the look of that photo. And because we use the AI tools to do it and achieve that look, it was really fast and took us no time at all. Let's jump into the next tip. My next tip for quickly selecting and masking inside of Photo RAW is to use the foreground and background masking function to quickly identify your foreground subject and then easily adjust or protect that background area surrounding them. So let's go into the Effects tab here. And what I want to do here first is I'm going to add a filter. And let's go into this Apply with Mask To section. And you can see at the top here, we have our background and foreground options. Now, the reason that we have the background and foreground options is because within our foreground, we may have other elements that we want to identify individually. So in this case, we have our mountain, we have our, the animal, natural ground, there's flora, different things that we want to identify individually. But let's say we want to just modify the entirety of our background. We can just head up here, select that background option there. It's identified the background region behind our animal there, and we can easily adjust or protect that particular section of the photo. So let's select that, and let's go in here, and let's just add a nice dark glow behind there. Just like that. So in an instant, we're modifying that background region behind our subject, and we're protecting the particular subject from that adjustment or filter. Now let's do the same thing to the actual foreground subject by just choosing foreground here. And this time, let's just add detail to our animal there. And again, I'm going to use Surreal here. I know it's a little bit intense, but just for demo purposes, I want you to be able to see that adjustment take place. And I can see here, by just turning this off and on, it's identified that subject there, and it's quickly applying that filter strictly to that foreground subject, and we're protecting the background from that detail and texture. Now, because dynamic contrast is a powerful filter, let's go in here and just boost our shadow tones a little bit so we can see a little bit more of the animal. And then let's pull back on our blacks there so that we have some contrast. Maybe not that much. That's a little bit too much. But if we turn this off and on here, really elevating the look of our animal there. Now, one thing I'm going to clean up here is just I'm going to remove that bit of it from the leg section there. I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard. I'll lower my brush size, and I'm going to make sure it's set to paint out. And I'll just quickly remove some of that detail from those legs there. And remember, with masking using AI, it could create those harsh edges in your mask. So if you have those sort of crunchy edges and you're looking to blend, remember to use the feathering slider to blur those edges and soften them up and ensure that the edges are a bit more natural within your masking. Let's jump into the next tip. My next tip for selecting and masking inside of Photo RAW is to create gradients or shape masks around or behind the particular subject that you're modifying. So in cases like this where I have a well-defined subject and just sort of a nice gradient backdrop, I like to employ this technique to add in gradients or shapes behind the subject that I'm modifying. And I don't mean shapes as an actual, blocky shapes, but more shape adjustments and modifications that blend in a bit better with the background, but can create a nice bit of interest. So with this particular bird here, let's just go into the effects tab there. Let's add a filter, and I'm going to add dynamic contrast. Let's use surreal there. And again, I know it's quite intense, but just for the sake of demoing, I'm just going to leave it at 100 there. But let's mask this away from our bird here. So to do that, let's just go into the masking options. I'll use this Mask AI menu. Let's choose Animal there. And let's choose Paint In to ensure that the detail is painted into the animal, yet is removed from the backdrop. Just like that. So we've created this mask here. Let's now copy this mask. Let's go into our local adjustments tab here. Let's just paste this mask. We could easily just have gone into that Mask AI menu, but I'm a huge fan of copying and pasting. Now in this instance here, because it's applying this to the animal, it's darkening it up. So let's actually invert the mask so that it's directly behind the animal in the background. Well, in this case, let's just use a gradient behind the animal to give the darken adjustment a little bit more of an interesting blend. So to do that, I'm going to hold down Option and K on my keyboard. Option and K is going to grab me my adjustable gradient tool. I can also grab it by heading into my local tools on the left-hand side, and it's this second tool up top there. And let's just use this preset linear top there, and let's just drop this down. Now to give you a better idea of what I'm doing, let's just go into the masking options here and view the mask. Because we have this bird shape still here, and we started with that bird shape mask, we can apply different gradients within our scene and it will still keep the shape of that bird within the scene. And it's super helpful if you're looking to, again, just get a little bit more interest within your background or foreground adjustments. So let's view this here and let's just play around with this. You can see we're just modifying the background behind our bird there. We're not actually modifying anything on the bird because we've created that mask of the bird beforehand. Now in this case, let's just maybe pull it this way, add a little bit of contrast to it, and then let's boost the whites a hair just to sort of blend things in. Just like that. So we have this sort of darker region up top there, and then we have this lighter region on the bottom left there. And it's all because of that original mask that we created, and then we put a gradient behind it. So you can see I'm just modifying again that top sort of far right region up there, and we're protecting this bottom left section from this local adjustment, while at the same time protecting the look of our subject. So let's copy this mask again. I'm a huge fan of copying and pasting masks. Let's go to the effects tab. Let's add a filter. Let's add the glow filter, one of my favorite filters, as you can tell. Go in here, let's paste that mask. And so now that we've pasted that mask here, let's go into the glow filter preset styles and let's use a bright glow. Let's use this Hollywood glow. Now with our mask that we have, and we're sort of modifying in all of these different filters here, let's hit M on the keyboard to grab our masking bug. That way we can modify the mask within this glow filter. And in this case, let's flip that so that we can see the filter on the left-hand side rather than this top right area, so that the Hollywood glow, that sort of brighter glow there, is applied opposite that darken adjustment. Now because we have a little bit of haloing going on with that bird there, let's go in and use the feathering option there. We'll feather things up a little bit, and we can blend in that adjustment a little bit more with the photograph. So let's hit the backslash key on the keyboard, original, and then with just some adjustments to fix things. My next tip for masking and selecting with landscape and wildlife photographs in Photo RAW is to use the mask sky command to quickly protect your sky from adjustments or filters. So with this photograph here, let's just quickly give it a little bit of TLC in the tone and color. Just going to pull back on the exposure there, then boost the midtones so that we can sort of see what's going on. Maybe some of those shadowy tones there. Maybe a little bit less midtones. But anyway, just sort of getting it to a better form there, if you will. So inside of the Develop tab there, everything's looking great in the tone and color section, or at least, looking decent. We could probably modify it a bit more, but it's looking way better now in the tone section. But in the color section here, if we modify the temperature, warming things up makes the foreground look better, but it makes the sky look a little weird. So in an instance like this is where you want to employ a bit of selective adjustment, and this is where that mask sky command comes in really handy. Because again, if we were to modify the global temperature, it doesn't really make the sky that appealing. It almost warms it up into an unnatural color. But by warming it up in the foreground, it looks a little bit better in that water and in the structure there. So to modify the foreground independently of the sky really easily, let's go into the local tab. Let's use this local adjustment. We'll rename it bottom color. Let's use our preset menu here, and we're going to go to temperature warm. Now with local adjustments, by default, they're not actually applied, so you actually have to apply them or mask them in to see them. In this case, all we have to do is modify that temperature there, and then go up to the top menu. We'll go to Mask, and then choose Mask Sky. With that, it's going to go in there and mask away the sky from that adjustment there. So you can see if I turn this off and on, it's giving that bottom image, or the bottom foreground part of the image, that color that we want, but it's removing it from that sky there. Now I can see it had a little bit of a tough time on this door there, so I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard to grab my masking brush. We'll shift our mode from paint out to paint in with Shift and X on the keyboard, and then I'll just brush that warmth into there. And don't worry, we'll get rid of that warmth there on those door sections in a minute here, but I just wanted to get all of the sections in my foreground nice and modified with this local adjustment there. So with this local adjustment here, let's actually go in and we'll also add in a bit more contrast, and let's boost up the whites just a hair there. And then let's modify that temperature because it's a little bit too warm there. So let's modify it back just a little bit there. Probably around 8 or 9 or so looks really great. So let's turn that off and on now. And we now have this local adjustment strictly modifying that foreground there. And again, that was the mask sky command, which you can access by just the top menu in Photo RAW, go to mask, and it's that mask sky option there. Really handy for protecting your sky from adjustments or filters that you're modifying. And let's zoom in here to the door section and those windows there, and let's add another adjustment. Let's just use the desaturating preset there. Looks like I added in saturation, so let's pull that back to remove saturation there. And I'm going to grab my perfect brush. I'll set my brush mode to paint in here, and I'll just brush in. Let's just desaturate a bit more. And I'll just brush in this desaturate adjustment into these windows there. And because they're different colors, or it's a sort of a large white tonal color versus these other colors surrounding it, it's doing a great job of just targeting the window pane and the door there. So if we zoom out now, we have those nice white doors there. Let's take a look at the next tip. My last tip for masking and selecting inside of landscape and wildlife photography is to use the line mask tool. The line mask tool is incredibly helpful in situations where you need to create your own shape or your own size of a mask. So let's go into this landscape image here, and let's go into the top section of this little walkway dock here, and let's just apply detail into these top boards there. Now, you may be thinking, why not use Super Select AI? Well, in cases like this where we have some intricacies and we have a lot of objects within the scene, AI might not do the best job. So let's just try it out. I'll hit K on my keyboard to grab my Super Select AI tool, and it does a great job with the water section and sort of the foliage areas and the sky even. But when it comes to this dock area, not so great there. So rather than using Super Select AI, we can easily go in here with our line mask tool, and we can identify the sections of this top walkway that we want to apply detail to. So to apply detail to this top section of the walkway, let's just first go into our effects tab here. I'm going to add a filter. Let's use dynamic contrast, and let's use surreal there so we can really see sort of what's going on with that detail. Now it looks great on the walkway here, but it's not looking that great in these areas that we want to be a bit soft and blurry. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into our line mask tool by going to our mask section of the tool well on the left hand side, and then we can grab our line mask tool with this icon here. It's the far right icon tool there. You can also grab it by holding down Shift and P on your keyboard. So with the line mask tool here, I'm just going to drop down a point. You can see I've dropped down a point there in the bottom, and wherever I move my cursor around, that line will follow it. I can then drop down another point to create a line, and we can sort of continue on there to create our shape over this little walkway section. Now if I hover over the beginning point there, I'll see a little circle there. That will allow me to close that particular shape there. In this case, we're not actually going to close it yet because we want to include this section of walkway as well. So let's just drop a point that's sort of out of the frame there. And we'll just continue on over here to this little section there of walkway. And then we'll just continue our little journey across this top area of that dock. So I'm going to drop down a point here, and you'll notice that the line doesn't quite cover these boards there. So if we hover back over the line that we created, we get this little point in the middle there. Well, we can hover over that point. It will show our cursor, and then we can click on it and drag it to create a curve or a bend in that line. So I'll just sort of continue that on as we go through here just to cover up these different little boards there. Don't have to be particularly too exact, but I do want to cover up the majority of this little walkway there. We'll use our point there to curve that a little bit. And it's looking good. Let me just sort of go down here and miss these little steps that I created there. Not a big deal. Drop a point, and then I'm just going to close this shape up that we created. So there we go. We've created our little shape there over our two little walkways. So in this case, we have the dynamic contrast already applied to the entirety of the photograph. And we want it applied to this walkway here. So our paint mode here, our mode here for paint out or paint in, that's going to modify what this bucket does wherever we click. So for instance, if I want to remove some of this dynamic contrast from the areas that we want soft, I'm going to leave this paint bucket at paint out. You can see a minus sign is now within that paint bucket there, telling me that it's painting it away. So let's just drop this down here in the area that we want to remove that dynamic contrast filter from. And you can see it will get rid of that dynamic contrast filter effect on that particular section there. And like we talked about in the first tip, let's go up and let's use the feathering here just to soften that edge a bit and make sure that we have a little bit more of a natural blend within the photograph. Let's choose done there. Let me turn this dynamic contrast filter off and on. And it's looking great. It's giving that walkway section there quite a bit of detail. So now that we've sort of done all of the hard work for the masking, we can apply different effects and filters to that area behind the detail. So let's go in, let's copy that mask that we just created. Let's add a filter. Let's add one of my favorites for landscapes, as you can tell, the glow filter. And let's just use that darker preset. Let's paste it and then invert it there. So I've pasted that mask that I created and then I inverted it to apply it to the section surrounding. So let's turn this off and on now. Doing a great job there. And one thing I just want to fix real quick, let me just grab a local adjustment here. And I'm just going to use a gradient. And I'm just going to drag it over here to the sky section there to sort of dim that down. It was looking just a little bit blown out there. So in two filters, and a local adjustment, this is our original and after. And we could, of course, modify it a bit more. We could have modified the develop tab. This is really just the raw image. We didn't do anything in develop. So this is purely effects and that local adjustments. So thanks so much for watching and learning about masking and selecting with landscapes and with wildlife photography. There's a ton of fun ways to create epic masks and to achieve that vision that you're going for. Have fun with your editing, and I'll see you in the next lesson.